Catus Maximus here, this time with a review of the common Proto quarter-inch drive driver tools. I wasn't exactly sure what to call these, but these are the common tools you drive quarter-inch drive sockets and accessories with. These breaker bars with the swivel head are actually technically called, according to their website, this is a spinner handle, this is a driver handle. This driver handle, I've done a comparison against a bunch of others in a previous review. This is an older model, but I looked it up, the newer models do use a full steel shank all the way through, so it's just a regular steel extension with a plastic cast around it. It's not two pieces like this older one. So they did improve this, but it does have the exact same color and look and shape of handle, but they are one-piece steel. The rest of these are pretty modern, and I don't have a lot of Proto quarter-inch, so I included the Proto universal joint in this review. Let's go ahead and take a close look. We'll take a look at my favorite of all these little tools, which would be this quarter-inch drive T-handle. I really like T-handles because they're really rigid, and it's easy to slide them and make anything into a spinner handle. And this one's actually pretty nice. It's an extended handle. It has a nice stamping on it there. I don't know if you can quite read that. It's really small stamping. The inserted little balls to capture it are pretty nice, and they're close to the end here. And it has, of course, a ball bearing to keep this from wanting to slide back and forth too much. And a nice, pretty thick head. And we can compare that against some others. These are some older style. I don't have any real modern ones. But if we were to compare against some more modern ones here, we have an old Thorson, which has a little bit weaker of a head, but it has a handle that's just about the same length. We can compare it against this old Walden. Obviously, it looks a lot nicer. It has a much more compact head than the old vintage style one, although I kind of like this one because they knurled one side, so when you slide it to this side, you get just a little bit of extra grip from that knurling there. And I thought that would be neat on the modern one. And then this is just not even a Mastercraft Pro, just a Mastercraft General. And this is what a much cheaper one. There's no ball dentant, so this thing just spins around. And when they inserted the balls, they were just kind of randomly placed near the end. And then the steel rod has just been cut off. They even bother to grind or finish the ends. So that's what a cheap one may look like. So this is really proven to be pretty handy, and it does have a nice, even though it's quarter-inch, you can get all four fingers around. It's really pretty nice to use. And the reason I say it's my favorite, if I had the newer spinner handle that was one-piece metal, then it would also be really great right next to this. These other pieces, I just thought the quality control wasn't so great on. We'll go ahead and do the spinner handle. And even though this spinner handle is pretty darn nice, looks beautiful, the knurling isn't so great. If I can get a little more zoom here. Yes, we can get a lot more zoom. The knurling's just a little flat. It's just like a light texturing. It's not like real knurling. And here's what really kind of disappointed me is you can see there that it looks like it was misshaping. That fork is actually bent outwards. It's going this way. And that kind of disappointed me. And other evidence of that is the pin. As you can see, it's flush on this side, but it's badly recessed. It's only engaged with half of the cross-section of this lug, which means that the spring isn't held very tight. And so this little end barely even works. If we just put, say, a 13mm socket on this, zoom out, it just falls. And so that's been a little frustrating. And they use a spring instead of a ball dentant in the back, which would have been much better. So that was a little disappointing, and I haven't felt like returning it because it's very difficult to actually get a warranty off Proto tools without mailing them in. I've had not the most pleasant experience trying to go to authorized Proto resellers, and there's a couple in town, and they just say mail it in. And so I thought, gosh. The universal joint, we'll finish up with the ratchet. The universal joint's actually not too bad. One thing I do like about it is the ball dentant on the universal joint for some reason is really stiff. It's the stiffest out of all the other tools here, although the sliding T-handle is pretty good. What I thought they could have done a little better job is the quality control. You can see if we rotate it around these lugs, you can see how thick it is right there, where it's a lot thinner there, so the grind isn't very even. And if we look closely here, you can see that it is not particularly well centered, and then this is such a thin piece of metal with the countersink for the head of the screw that there just isn't a lot of metal there. I do appreciate that they do use screws, so if it breaks you can rebuild it. And this one actually has pretty good tension. It doesn't want to fall. We can put a 13mm socket on it and it will actually hold it in position. So that one's not too bad. They don't flute the back end, Proto, and even on this socket, Proto for some reason just didn't ever want to retool for fluting the drive ends of their tools. For people who may not want to look at my comparison of driver handles, here's a quick look at the older Protos. So the newer one is just like a 1/4 inch, 6-inch extension all the way through with plastic, and there'll just be a couple tabs pinched. So it won't be two-piece like this. And they also don't do this thing where they turn stuff down. That was pretty distinctive of old Proto tools. Now let's go ahead and finish up with the Ratchet. Oops, I was going to compare this Proto. Here's an old Husky, American-made Husky, and it's actually pretty nice. The knurling is not perfect, but it's still pretty darn good. And it's just well made, you know, everything's pretty even. The resistance or the friction is still pretty good on there. And things are well centered. Even this old American Craftsman, and Craftsman breaker bars really I always thought were kind of a bit funky. I'll just say that. But it's not bad. It's also well centered. You can't replace the pin. It's a rivet that's mushed over, but that's, you know, just fine. And they have a strong ball dented. So even an old Craftsman, even though they're kind of funky looking, is, you know, well made. And so that was what was so disappointing about this Proto, is this is actually kind of an expensive little breaker bar or spinner handle, and it just, you know, you have to pay to mail it back just to, you know, replace something that technically isn't broken but just wasn't made very well. Not for the price of Proto professional tools. We're going to go ahead and finish up with this Ratchet here. And the Ratchet's pretty decent. This is a Ratchet where I actually did swap out. So this would be the second one of these Ratchets that I've owned. And even though this one's not perfect, it was better than the last one. So the last one had a real terrible problem with it reversing itself. So you'd actually run the Ratchet action, and when you get a certain type of tension on it, the little reversing switch would just flip itself. The little pawl would get caught, and it would self-reverse. This one has done better, but it was initially frustrating. Let's take another closer look at this. For the price of the Proto, these are Allen screws, so you can rebuild it. Professional. But these are tiny. These are 50 thousandths Allen screws. These are used as just a tiny, tiny little Allen wrench. And so it's a Ratchet. These are going to get filled with crud. And they're just such tiny hex fasteners that you'll have to use a sewing needle to actually scrape out the crud. And if you don't, they'll just strip out the first time and you'll be stuck drilling them out. Another thing that I thought that I wasn't particularly pleased with is it just looks like a cast aluminum switch or reversing lever. And the system inside, the way the spring's set up, it just doesn't have like a lot of tension. It's super easy to reverse. Unfortunately, way too easy. And I've actually put in a stronger spring, about as strong as you can get without having it wanting to self-reverse a bunch. Now, as far as the knurling, it's okay. It's pretty good. But still, it's rounded. And when you have knurling, you really want something that gives you a lot of grip. I'll show you. Here we have a Starrett hole gauge. But I wanted to show, when you know, people may think I'm getting a little critical about the knurling on all these tools. When you look at knurling, and when I'm judging knurling, I'm judging against knurling like this, which is, you know, textbook perfect. Perfect little pyramids. Maybe not and it depends. There's sometimes where on bigger tools you actually want them not to come up to perfect little pyramids. But on smaller tools you want more grip. And so you have them come up to perfect little diamonds. And so when we talk about good knurling, this is what I mean. I'm judging against something like this, which just has absolutely perfect knurling. I'm going to go and open up this Proto and show how it works inside. It's one single large pawl, so it has a lot of grip. And versus the little gear wrench 1/4 inch ratchet, it's thicker, and they use a standard bottom plate, so there's a lot more space. So it has a pretty, large pawl with a lot of teeth on it. I'm sure this ratchet would probably fail at the square before. the ratcheting mechanism gave out. But let's go and open it up here. We'll use our tiny little Bondhouse Allen wrench here. They did put a little bit of thread locker on the ends of these screws, which was wise of them. We'll pull out those 2 screws and see if I can't keep this in frame. Get that plate off. And a nice thick plate, as you would expect. So here's the issue that's inside this ratchet. And you see I have it really clean and really lightly oiled, and that seems to be the only way. If you put a little bit too much grease, then it has a really light spring. And there we go. So it has a really light spring, and it's kind of oddly integrated into the trigger. It doesn't have a spring down here in this groove. I've tried improving it by putting a spring down this recess, and I don't even know why that, or the recess for the switch, and it just makes the situation worse. And what happens is sometimes this thing just gets caught, and when you reverse it, the whole pawl slides with the ratcheting mechanism, and then itself reverses. Although this newer one is a little better. And let's take these parts out. The reason I returned the previous one is you can see that they actually hollow forged the anvil, and I'm not exactly sure why they do that either. Let's see if any more light. And I think intentionally, because it will shear before the ratchet gives out, so you can just replace the anvil. But the first one I had was so poorly forged that there was actually a hole through the top, and oil would just leak out through the top and through the ball. And that hasn't happened on this one. So I was kind of disappointed. And then the little Ratchet Pawl. And you can see part of the issue is down inside here, if we can get just the right light, then I can show you. Is in there, there's a little pin that holds the pawl, and you can just see it. There's like a microscopic watch spring inside that, and it's just way too tiny to really effectively hold the pawl, and it's just on this hair-thin pin. I really don't understand why they did it like that. The pawl itself, compared to that gear wrench, is huge. I mean, it's a nice, thick, beefy pawl with looks like, you know, 8 or 9 teeth on it. So the ratchet's plenty strong. It's just kind of a design error right there where it just doesn't have very positive action. So I just wanted to do that quick review of these Proto tools. I know it's a little bit of a long video, but I appreciate you watching, and now you have some good detail on what you can expect if you were to order these tools. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe. Catus Maximus out.